Happy Halloween, everybody! This time of year, of course, I always make a video talking about a horrorcore or horror-themed rap record, everything from Houdini's Haunted House of Rock to the Flatliners. And so who are we going to look at today? After all, actually, when you think about it, there aren't really that many horrorcore artists, especially, if you limit it to just what's released on, like, vinyl and cassette and, classic physical releases, which is what I cover here. But I got a pretty good one for you today. Someone I've never talked about on my blog or my site. He's pretty overlooked, but he's pretty good. I'd say he definitely fits the definition of hardcore. He is one of those artists, like just about every hardcore artist, who kind of went on to dial it back and deny it years later when the hardcore bubble kind of blew up. Like Esham was like, oh no, it's just acid rap, and Gravedigger's like, oh no, we're just like a parody and it's like a, metaphor. He's another one of those guys. Crucified Dib said, no, it's just me being crazy, but now I'm already the rugged man. I talk about the industry. Everybody did that. This guy did too. But there's no denying, I think, that this early debut single by the man known as Bigfoot is out-and-out hardcore. We're going to talk about this single as well as his whole career. I mean, just look at the picture, you can kind of tell he's going for hardcore. This came out in 1995 on Zestland Records, which is a pretty obscure label. But this guy's from the Bronx, and you can definitely kind of feel that in this record. But again, it's also really kind of hardcore, horrorcore. The two songs in this 12-inch right here, well, first of all, we'll say Bigfoot is basically the guy. Here they kind of make it seem like it's almost like the name, like Black Lagoon's Bigfoot. And if you look on the back here, Bigfoot is actually in quotes. But if you look at all the rest of his records and the rest of his career, he is Bigfoot. That's his name. So I don't know why they kind of label it that way in this 12-inch, but maybe a label screw up because it was his first single on an independent label that wasn't his label. Later on, Swamp City Records was his label that put out some of his 12-inches and that he still uses to this day on like YouTube and everything. So maybe they just screwed up. I don't know, but Bigfoot is definitely the dude. And Swamp City is his label, not the label for this record, but on his later stuff, and also his kind of extended crew. Later on, you'll see him doing some stuff with some other guys. Post vinyl 12-inches, more like YouTube era Bigfoot. He does some other guys who are also like Swamp City family, I guess. But we'll come back to all that. What we want to talk about now is this single right here. 2 songs. He actually had a music video, which you can find on YouTube and everything. Pretty cool. Definitely very much exactly what you would think of when you think 1995 New York horrorcore. Like, it's got all those elements kind of combined. There's definitely sort of a feel of like a hardcore Naughty by Nature, cruise pop kind of video in a way. Half Pit, Half Dead. But definitely, like wearing the hockey mask kind of thing. Or actually, I don't know if he's wearing a hockey mask in that video. He's wearing a hockey mask in a lot of his videos. He's wearing some kind of mask. Maybe it was this mask. He's got 2 songs. Cannot Escape is the main one. That's the one they made the video for and everything. That's the first song. There's 2 mixes, plus the instrumental. But really, they're very similar. They're basically 2 slight differentiations of the same song. But it's straight out hardcore. I'm going to play some clips, of course, so you're going to hear it. But, from the hook going, cannot escape. He's got this really kind of menacing, dark tone. Lyrically, it is just full of horror movie references, violent imagery, kind of creative, fantastic stuff, everything that qualifies as horrorcore. And then the B-side is multiple stab wounds, and that's just what it sounds like. Again, though, if you think of like ICP or the kind of the more out there crazy hardcore, this guy does kind of rein it in a little bit more with the more traditional Bronx, New York kind of sound to it. So it's really pretty dope. He's not, this guy's not exactly like Cool G Rap. He's not the greatest lyricist ever, but he's got kind of a nice kind of hardcore edge. He's a little bit sort of Tim Dog, in the best sense, as opposed to maybe some of his later stuff, mixed in with, sort of a street urban kind of stuff. And he's got some creativity thanks to the hardcore element. So this is a pretty killer 12-inch. The production's pretty nice. Bigfoot himself produces one of the tracks. The other one was actually produced by a guy who I think like a lot of electro house records and stuff, but there's no electro house. Like, I just did a blog post about Too Poetic, and he, from the Gravediggers and his pre-Gravediggers material, and he did his whole album with a house guy, and that has a very strong kind of house music influence through it. I wouldn't necessarily call his album house music, but you can definitely hear the house sound in it. This, no, nothing like that. This is straight, raw, gritty, 1995, independent 12-inch, everything you want in New York hip-hop. So that's really dope, and it's also hardcore at the same time, which is definitely why I recommend this single. But yeah, like I said, he's definitely one of those guys who, when the bubble burst and hardcore was no longer cool, tried to kind of grow out of it and got, frankly, a little boring, because then his raps got a little bit more generic. He did like 4 or 5 12-inches, they'd still have like horror movie themed titles and definitely violent imagery in the lyrics, but it'd be much more like just kind of, violent metaphors in my battle raps, or kind of a little bit of street talk, but not necessarily horrorcore, kind of easing out of it. Like later on, he wound up doing records like Shabam Sadiq and that kind of stuff. So, moving away from horrorcore for sure. This is probably, of his vinyl 12 inches, the only one I'd really call out and out horrorcore. Some of his later ones I kind of say hardcore influence, and then after that I even say not hardcore at all, and just straight New York hardcore hip-hop. But then you may remember me referencing his YouTube and stuff like that. This guy never went away. He stopped putting out wax, because after you get into the 2000s, it gets harder and harder to do, because the push had gone to Serato and all that sort of thing, and MP3s. So he, like everybody, moved away from the vinyl scene, but he kept putting out stuff. He's got videos on like Vimeo, and like he's been around. He has a MySpace page and everything. So he actually has videos throughout the years, up to quite recently, like 2017. And if you check out some of his new stuff, like a lot of other hardcore artists too, you can tell that he's re-embraced the horrorcore. He's got songs like Kill, 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 The Purge, which aren't as great as, like, I'd much prefer this Bigfoot 12-inch to the newer stuff, just stylistically, musically and all. But lyrically, he's still there, but he's also, my point is, he's much more horrorcore again. He's re-embraced that, both in the imagery, the videos, he's rapping in graveyards, he's got the hockey mask, lyrically, it's all about horrorcore and killing, and, it is straight up horrorcore. He, not 100% of the time. He does do other songs that are not hardcore. He kind of goes back and forth and mixes it up. But just like, everybody, when it's sort of like, we're not hardcore, oh, now that we sort of see that on the internet, there's an audience for hardcore that either came back or probably more realistically never left and just kind of got neglected for a while when the fad moved away. Oh, there's a scene for this. The Flatliners were able to come back. The Headless Horsemen were able to kind of come back a little bit. They kind of put out some of their lost songs. You got all kinds of new horrorcore artists, who are these kind of obscure guys from the Midwest and everything. ICP, obviously, just blowing up to a bizarre, crazy phenomena, whatever that's about. So, hardcore came back. So you sort of see people like Isham say, oh, well, you know what? Maybe I sort of was the father of horrorcore, even though 10 years ago I said I was never hardcore, and a few years before that I called myself the Stephen King of rap. Like they're just kind of always going back and forth. So that's kind of what Bigfoot is doing too. But who cares about that? You know that story, and frankly, it's not a very fun story. What is cool is to find new or hip-hop artists you've never heard of before, especially vintage horrorcore, and that's what this is. This is from 1995, right there at the bubble. Not quite, it's a little bit late, honestly. 93, 94 was the real peak of, like, Cellar Dwellers, Gravediggers coming out with Diary of a Madman. That was the time when horrorcore, everybody thought that was it, and the Flatliners were on, Def Jam's big artist, and then kind of late 94 is when it ended. So he kind of came a little bit late, but that could just be him as an independent artist having a hard time getting his vinyl to actually come out. Like he might have had these songs all kind of built for 1993, and then by the time Zestland got their thing together, or maybe he just came a little bit later. Maybe he actually decided he didn't care if the bubble had burst, and fuck it, I'm Bigfoot and I'm hardcore, and here we go. But anyway, it is a fun, really cool song. I prefer Cannot Escape. It's got a really kind of, I was going to say catchy. It's not really a catchy hook. It's an engaging, effective hook. Definitely kind of a cool, dark sound. But Multiple Stab Wounds is also really dope. I'm going to let you hear play clips of both. So here we go. A horrorcore artist. A lot of you guys probably have never heard of before, but definitely pure classic horrorcore in every sense. It's not like a gimmicky joke record. It's not a half and half. It's gangster rap that's just sort of over the edge of violence, like Brother Lynch Hung or something. This is hardcore. This is Bigfoot. So we're going to start out with Cannot Escape on Zestland Records.
It's on, boy. It's on. I swing my style like samurais, cut and win. Draws collapse when fist connects with your chin. Twist snakes like caps off a bottle of Bex. I skip mad ugly, fat girls that spend decks. Straight up gore, bloodies like sliver. Leave you floating, belly open, river. Upon this physical form, I keeps a grin. I cook niggas in minutes like Uncle Ben's. Heads get buried under Haywoods at the Staples. Bent to pieces of body parts hung by cables. Here to bring you mad styles of the spawn. Bones breaking, neck snapping, losing arms. I'm possessed by the evil within. My head starts to spin, my tongue starts wiggling. Bring more more dramas than soap operas have dramas. Blood on my pajamas, another Jeffrey Dahmer's. I stab, slice right through you with the hooks. Dice, put that in your Guinness books. A record is hectic, that piece gets disconnected. Seconds as I wrecks this all. Stormflake bed because we're straight out the swamps. Sniper on the scene, let me focus. Get dropped like bombs in Vietnam. Voodoo like hand skills to rip off your arms. I get vexed when I flex. I'm ripping holes in your chest, separate your spines from your necks. Come correct, watch me catch wreck in a sec. I bring terror to your projects. Niggas scatter, brains are hearts on a platter. Mini stabs with the dagger, toss that ass off Niagara. Force, I tap your jaw with my claws till you scream, I can't take it no more. I bring the funk, I lock that ass in the trunk. Represent the Bronx and drag your body through the swamps. Tranquilizer guns with darts aiming for your hearts. Pushing body parts and carts. I'm leaving niggas brain dead with multiple stab wounds to the head. Enough said. I'm leaving niggas brain dead with multiple stab wounds to the head. Enough said. I'm leaving niggas brain dead with multiple stab wounds to the head. Enough said. I'm leaving niggas brain dead with multiple stab wounds to the head. Enough said. Leaving niggas brain dead with multiple stab wounds to the head. Enough said. I bring terror, speed of a locomotive train. Aiming for your brain, I'm insane. My style switches like niggas changing into bitches. Deep slash across the forehead, guarantee you stay.